Piensa en la inmortalidad del cangrejo, and welcome to Shift+F1, a podcast about speedy race cars. That, by the way, of course, is a Mexican idiom meaning think about the crab's immortality.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
That's we're in top 5 idiom territory. Please explain it to me.
It translates roughly to getting lost in your own thoughts.
And what was it again? Don't
Think about the crab's immortality.
think about the crab's immortality. Wow.
Yeah.
That sounds like a Monster Magnet song, doesn't it?
Or like a Zen koan or something.
Yeah.
Ponder the crab's immortality.
Exactly. Yeah. Wow.
There's a lot of, let's say, questionable judgment on and off the track this week. I'm Drew Scanlon. Joining me, Danny O'Dwyer. How are you, Danny?
I'm doing great, Drew. I'm here in beautiful Seattle, Washington. I got out of the airport and I got on one of those, the little the bus to the rental car facility, and there was a lady, couple of people in front of me, draped in, I shit you not, head to toe in Charles Leclerc merchandise.
Wow.
And never before have I been so sure that someone had just come back from a race. So I gleefully jumped on, tucked away my bag, and said, "Oh, were you at the race? Were you?" And she just like smiled at me, and I said, "Congratulations! What a fun trip for her. I bet she wasn't expecting Ferrari to do well. Let's say this past weekend."
Also joining us, Rob Zachney. How are you, Rob?
Not bad. Eager to just discuss what is a pass. What is racecraft?
While we're
back.
getting philosophical here about crabs, etc. Yeah, let's get down to it. If you're new to this podcast, very warm welcome to you. And if you are new to Formula One itself, we have an episode just for you. The preseason primer assumes no prior F1 knowledge and explains how the sport works and who everybody is. So if you would like to go back and listen to that, it's episode 257. Also, this show would not be possible without our audience over at patreon.com/shiftf1, where every month we release an ad-free version of the podcast, along with bonus podcasts and videos that are exclusive to our patrons. They cover racing documentaries and films, F1 video games, experiments with other racing series, and a lot of weird things. So if you would like to support the show and get access to all that fun stuff, head over to patreon.com/shiftf1 or click the link in the show notes. What's going on in Patreon land this month, Danny?
I still can't remember what you guys did. What, it was some movie that sounded cool. What was it called again?
The Last American Hero.
The Last American Hero.
I wanted to redirect on something about that because we did that whole episode on it, and we were talking about basically it's the story of old school NASCAR drivers, like loss of innocence and coming to grips with. So I was reading the Pauline Kael review of that movie. You know what's wild?
What?
The actual story, way less cynical than the movie we watched.
Oh.
Like the movie we watched, he's like, you got to go work for someone else, son, if you're going to compete in NASCAR. Like you have to sell out in order to make it in this country. Apparently, you know what that dude didn't do? And what the Tom Wolfe articles are kind of about? Not selling out. Apparently, he was like, "Nah, I think I can be like an owner operator and just make it work my way." And that kind of worked out. So I'm curious to know more about the actual guy. But it was so funny reading the review because Pauline Kael loved the movie, but then went back and read the original articles about this odd NASCAR legend and was like, when does Hollywood go and make a story worse and kind of nastier than reality? Usually you punch it up to make it more palatable. Very strange to go the other direction, where it's like, no one would believe this good old boy from the backcountry could make good, so we'll create a version of the story where he sold out as quickly as possible.
Wow.
Hey, it was the 70s. People were trying a lot of things.
Extremely.
Yeah.
Incredible. Well, speaking of sellouts, we're here to sell our space and our livery to our incredible battle, the title sponsors. Thank you to all of our beautiful title sponsors. It's a me Ferrario. Get rich. Maybe that was her. Maybe that was It's a me Ferrario. It was her. She was basically an embodiment, a physical bipedal embodiment of Ferrari. Get Rich O'Dai Ryan, Agave ATX, Cyphus Trading, Turf SES, at Team Blackjack, Michael Maves, Gordy's Army, at Talking Autos, Olivia Evans, telemetrydeck.com, FTC, Drew Stewart, Bailey Foote, Abdullah Al-Thani, Jason Chadwick, Abraham Getchell, The Space Above Us podcast, Bunny Fiend, Snigs, Alex Goucher, Max Voltaire, Circuit Demon, Troy Stammer, William Rumpf, Irvine Clinical Research, Lachlan the Maddened Man, Samurai Love Story, and Jason Kelly. Thank you all for supporting us over at patreon.com/shiftf1, where you can get reviews of movies you'll never watch and more, including Discord access and other things that I can't remember at the moment. Years of videos. If you want to see me play video games that are Formula 1 and racing related, there's about 30 of them up there. It's quite a lot. It's been a while.
Yeah. We haven't yet decided, I think, on our next Patreon movie, but
We haven't.
Oh man, October's almost out.
I know.
Is there a spooky one? Is there can we do a spooky, like a Halloween
spooky car movie?
Spooky car. Ooh.
We'll have to consult the document.
What about like The Hitcher or like, what was that one with the
Christine?
haunted car? Yeah. Something like that we could do.
Yeah. Good ideas. We could also throw it to the Patreons. The patrons do a poll.
Oh, you know what? Horror movie we could watch. Closer to the Edge, the Isle of Man
Oh
documentary.
my God.
We could do that again.
Already done it, but yeah. Frightening beyond measure.
Yeah.
Is Body Parts a racing movie? Cars featured rather prominently.
Ooh. So's Hereditary. That's got a pretty
Jesus
messed up
Christ.
car scene in it.
Well, send in
Maybe-
your
maybe not.
recommendations. shiftf1podcast@gmail.com. We've got a stacked show, so let's just jump right into it. We've got the sprint, we've got the race, we've got some news, we've got some track walk. So let's kick things off here with the sprint grid. Max Verstappen got sprint pole, if we're calling it that, first on the grid. Ahead of George Russell, Charles Leclerc, Lando Norris, Carlos Sainz, Nico Hülkenberg up in 6th, Lewis Hamilton 7th, Kevin Magnussen 8th, Yuki Tsunoda 9th, and Franco Colapinto starting the sprint in 10th. Behind them, we've got Perez, Gasly, Stroll, Alonso. Lawson had his time deleted after a track limits violation. Piastri down in 16th place, Ocon, Bottas, Zhou, and Albon, who's required to start from the pit lane after his car was modified whilst under parc fermé conditions. So for 19 laps or so, Danny, do you want to take us through the start of the sprint?
Yeah, sure. So it was Verstappen and then Russell was in second, isn't that right?
That's right.
On this one? Yeah, Hamilton not having a great race weekend. So Verstappen gets away good, takes a relatively closer to the apex. It wasn't like super tight entrance, but Russell wasn't really battling with him. Lando Norris, though, a sign of maybe things to come. He got up he sort of is shadowing Russell while the Ferraris are kind of on the outside of him as they go around the first turn, and basically sort of steals a couple of places from those Ferraris as they exit the first as they come around the apex of turn 1. He almost gets second, but Russell manages to, I guess he gets a good exit, and he's also in a more advantageous position considering the next turn is a right-hander. But it put him in a great position. The Ferraris kind of tripped over each other a little bit and were out of that particular fight. There was also a spin somewhere at the back, wasn't there, on this one? Was it Albon, I think, got tripped over somebody?
Albon got into...
Are you thinking of Ocon? I think that's the race.
No, it definitely happened to Ocon in the race, but
Yes.
I thought also maybe somebody got a little bit spun around on this one.
Okay.
I could be wrong. Where did Albon start?
The back.
Oh, okay. So no, I take it back. Maybe I was getting conflated with that. But yeah, a good example of, I mean, we talked about it last week, how there's a couple of interesting lines through that first turn. If you're competing with people, it gets messy. We'll talk about it when it comes to the race. But this was a good example of, if you're a couple of places behind here, it's kind of advantageous because you can tell where someone's going to exit that corner very easily by where they brake and where they turn. And Lando did a great job putting his car in the right spot.
Yeah, he and Russell kind of did a drag race down into the S's with Norris coming out on top. And then from there it was Russell third, Leclerc fourth, Sainz fifth. Leclerc then goes for a dive up the inside of Russell later in the lap, but Russell fights back, the two going side by side for the next few corners. Russell eventually regaining the place. I'll say a lot of pretty good back and forth battling at this track this weekend.
Yeah, it's a good track for side by side racing through sections. There's certain parts where drivers have to dive out, but I think the thing that we enjoyed this time was battles down into turn 11 at the end of the straight, and them continuing the whole way through that arena section, and then kind of it settling back into not side by side, but like a little bit of, okay, now I'm going to hang behind you until we get to the start finish straight, and then I'll see if I can close up on you again. We didn't see much overtaking into that first turn as we do in other years, though. I was a bit surprised by that.
Yeah. Leclerc soon, though, comes under pressure from his teammate Sainz, who dives up the inside of him on lap 2, but can't make it stick, and on the following lap, tries again up the inside of turn 1, this time with the aid of DRS. Leclerc regains the spot, though, with a cutback, and then 2 laps later, on lap 5, Sainz tries it again at the turn 15 complex, Danny, that arena section, and this time seals the deal, getting himself up into 4th. In this, his last quarter season with the red team. Around lap 6, Alonso and Liam Lawson are scrapping, not for the first time and not for the last. Alonso claiming, quote, "The Alpha Tauri is such an idiot." But Lawson
Welcome
does
to
end
Formula
up ahead
One,
there.
Liam Lawson.
Yeah. Ocon, though, was lurking behind both of them, and when Lawson is slow through a corner, that loss of the momentum from both of them allows Ocon to get through them both down into turn 15. A great opportunistic move.
That
What
was
do we
the
think?
funniest bit of this. Just like him being like, this guy's an idiot, and then immediately eating shit
Yes.
was
Yes.
one of the finest moments of the weekend, especially because he did not seem to be being an idiot. Like, just like the in-car it didn't even look like there was that close a call really happening. It was just Alonso being peevish was kind of my vibe. Maybe more happened if you watch more of his in-car. But like what we saw on, during the race, just looked like he was just not having a really great day behind the wheel.
Yeah. Sainz, though, having a great day. Turn 15 continues to be a hot spot, and he dives up the inside of Russell for 3rd place, and with a good exit manages to come out ahead. Russell complaining that his front left tire is toast, and indeed he falls to Leclerc in the same spot 1 lap later. Another fun battle between Tsunoda and Perez for 9th place. Perez passing Tsunoda at the end of the back straight into turn 12, and then Tsunoda briefly repassing him into turn 15, but Perez ultimately has the traction to power back ahead as they complete sector 3. And on the final lap, the Ferraris have closed up to Norris, and as he comes into turn 1, he locks up and allows Sainz to shoot through at turn 1 into 2nd place. And that is how it ends. Max Verstappen having run away with it up front, wins the sprint, followed by Carlos Sainz in 2nd and Lando Norris 3rd. Behind them, we've got Leclerc, Russell, Hamilton, Magnussen, and Hülkenberg rounding out the top 8. And then the non-points finishers of Perez, Piastri, which, wow, he started in 16th place and finished 10th. That's pretty good.
Nice.
Tsunoda in 11th, Colapinto, Stroll, Gasly, Ocon in 15th, Lawson, Albon, Alonso, Zhou, and Bottas. Piastri also received a 5-second penalty for forcing another driver off the track. That did not appear to change his position, though.
There was another slight mini incident on that final lap where Leclerc was trying to also overtake Lando, and just in that arena section, I think it was turn 15, he complained that Norris had moved under braking, but he was just taking the normal defensive line into that turn. and Leclerc got a little bit close to him and locked up. Yeah, I don't think much was made of it after the fact, but in the moment,
it was cleared. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a pretty, I'm sure if they did overlays of, it's not the ideal way through that turn, but it is the defensive line when you're going there. So it wasn't. Yeah, I was surprised to hear Leclerc say that.
Right after Sainz got past him, because
Yeah.
I feel like because Norris started locking up everywhere. Like his tires were pretty done, and so I feel like the thing that like Leclerc nearly ran into him, but it also looked like part of it was just Norris was no longer able to brake very well into those corners. So I understand Leclerc. Like I think Leclerc had the pace, and if Norris had not been sort of skittering across the track like that, Leclerc might have been able to find something instead of take evasive action. But it's the last lap. Everyone's in a pretty compromised car by that point.
Everybody's sprinting. But with that over, we now get to the race, and the grid shook out like this. Little different from the sprint because Lando Norris is on top. Max Verstappen second, was setting a pretty hot lap in Q3, but George Russell crashed into a wall that put an end to the session effectively. And we'll get to where he lines up, but just to finish out the rest of them.
Quick thing.
Yeah.
I didn't, like, YouTube TV did not know there was a qualifying session after nothing appeared in my YouTube TV showing the quality. No, just zero, zilch. And I was like, did they go back to the sprint qualifying thing? Did they set the grid based on the sprint?
Oh, funny.
Seems weird they'd go back to that. But it was very weird having that glitch. A further argument for why I kind of hate when F1 does this, because it feels like the TV providers aren't fully cognizant of they've profoundly messed with the schedule here.
Yeah. YouTube doesn't understand what a sprint is. You got 2 qualifyings? That doesn't make sense. But yeah, Carlos Sainz will start third ahead of Charles Leclerc. Those Ferraris are in lockstep this weekend. Piastri now starting 5th for the race ahead of Pierre Gasly, 6th place to start in his Alpine. And then Fernando Alonso, Kevin Magnussen, Sergio Perez, and Yuki Tsunoda rounding out the top 10. Behind them, Nico Hülkenberg, Esteban Ocon, Lance Stroll, Alex Albon, Franco Colapinto in 15th place. And then we've got Bottas ahead of Lewis Hamilton in 17th place. He, in his qualifying session, had a time deleted, but that time would only have given him 16th. And instead it gave him 19th. But thankfully for him, I guess, everyone else behind him had a bunch of penalties. Zhou with power unit penalties, Liam Lawson with power unit penalties, and then George Russell having crashed in Q3, and they changed his car setup under Parc Fermé. So that will require him to start from the pit lane. So as we head into the race, the United States Grand Prix in Austin, Texas, Danny, do you want to take us through the start?
Sure. I think it was when we were doing the track walk last week, I said that there wasn't that many incidents to talk about. But one of them was a great battle between Mercedes. That I think they put the highlights on YouTube's F1 channel, or F1's YouTube channel, sorry, actually last week as well. And it was punctuated by an incident at the front with Hamilton and Rosberg, which I mentioned, which is the thing about that first turn, is you're able, if you can get the inside line, you can force somebody out wide and basically completely buckle them for the next turn. So I was kind of half waiting to see it during the sprint race, and then we saw exactly that happen in the feature or in the Grand Prix. And I think, in a way, this is one of those situations where, while I feel sorry for Norris about what happened next, I also am kind of shocked that he let it happen. So Norris had a good start. He defends up the inside,
sort of,
but he doesn't really close the door. And the thing is, Verstappen is closer to, let's say, how Russell was to him in the sprint race. And the thing about Max is you need to close the door on him in the same way that Norris knew that he needed to shut the door on Leclerc in the final, on turn 15 in the sprint race. He needed to do the same here, and he didn't. And when he left that little gap open, it basically allowed Max to go up the inside. He is very good under braking, but it's also fresh tires. It's uphill into this turn. It's a relatively easy place to try not to lock up at the start of this race. He gets up the inside, and then he does the cheeky Max Verstappen thing that we know he does, and that we've seen Lewis do to Rosberg, and we see people do when the fighting is close, which is you just take a wider turn around that corner than you need to, and you push the other car out so far that by the time they get back on the track, they don't have enough traction to get past you in what is a fairly quick turn 2 you reach once you've sort of finished your turn on turn 1. So while it's sort of cheeky, it's also a tried and true tactic that happens here, and anyone who's raced Max knows that this is what he's going to do. So I kind of don't feel that sorry for Lando. But in doing that, the other problem that happened was that the Ferraris, Leclerc clearly also knew that this was something that was going to happen and took a much later dive into turn 1. He went around the outside so that he could, because he knows Sainz is on the outside of him, because he's started in third, which is on the right side of the boxes. They're facing up the hill. And this is a left-hander. So Leclerc basically just like swings around, and then as the two of those boys are fighting, basically steals their lunch money and goes down the inside. Sainz, if he had been anticipating what Leclerc was doing, might have also gotten past the two of them, but he sort of gets wedged between the Verstappen coming back on the track and Leclerc now basically adopting the racing line as they go down that hill. He still manages to get in front of Lando as they get around that first turn. Norris is sort of falling through the pecking order. But it's a great start for Leclerc, a decent start for Verstappen, and kind of a naive start for Lando Norris.
Yeah, so Norris eventually, after all that, is running in fourth. Sainz ahead of him, then Verstappen, then Leclerc in first. This is where Ocon gets spun around by Albon at turn 1, brings out a brief yellow flag. Somebody else who had a good start was Hamilton, who made up 5 spots into 12th place in short order. But as they head down into turn 12, Sainz takes the opportunity to shoot up the inside of Verstappen, but they both go off track, and Sainz gives the position back. Little foreshadowing for a lot that goes on at this corner in this race. And then, just mentioned, a good start for Hamilton. Lap 3, cut to Hamilton, beached in the gravel. And on replay, it looks like he just loses it, going over a corner, which is the same place that Russell crashed in Q3, interestingly. Hamilton would later attribute it to a gust of wind. But this, very uncharacteristic for him. Brings out a safety car, which Leclerc was opening up a gap, but that is now neutralized. And so on the restart, Verstappen does a great job sticking with Leclerc.
Yes.
Leclerc does not get a jump on him. But Verstappen is unable to attempt anything like he did on the first lap, and Leclerc keeps first for now.
This is one of the most consistent weapons in Max Verstappen's arsenal, and has been for, I'd say ever since I've seen him fighting at the front. Like he was consistently good at this against Hamilton, and Hamilton's good at restarts. I also think Verstappen has also shown over and over again that he's really good at restarts and creating the gap. But his ability to put his car in a position that whenever they go, he is just right on their rear gun is genuinely impressive. Like he's able to do it fairly consistently, and once again, it was just like sort of unsurprising to see him. Yeah, once again, he's right behind the Ferrari, and if it was a different Red Bull, who knows? He might have overtaken him into that first turn, but that's not the car they have at the moment.
Yeah. Around that time, we get some more. This is a lap 11. Lawson and Alonso duking it out. Lawson hanging out around the outside of turn 2, and then later diving up the inside of 12. and keeping the place through that stadium section. A few laps after that, Alonso falls to Colapinto, also at turn 12, elevating Colapinto to 10th place, the points positions.
Just a quick thing. Also in this window, we start getting those really weird messages from signs about that he's low on power, and then the cockpit is filling with the smell of fuel.
That's right.
Which I was like, oh, this guy's done. This Ferrari is like low on power. Suddenly I smell fuel in the car. Just stick a fork in that. It's done. And they get this sort of like slightly peevish Ferrari message over the radio. As you can see, the problem is fixed, and it was fixed. But like he was sounding increasingly anxious about like how much gas he was smelling in the car.
Yeah.
And I am so curious what they were able to fix remotely that would have restored his feeling of power on exit, and also addressed the fact that like smell of fuel was like escaping somewhere in the power unit of the fuel tank, somewhere it was coming out. I'm so curious about like what that is. Maybe some fuel was just like getting splashed somewhere and was finally burning off, but that doesn't seem likely because it evaporates so fast.
It's just one of those,
just a weird thing.
Yeah, one of those dials says fuel goes to engine, and then if you turn it the other way, it says fuel goes everywhere, like in Derek Zoolander gasoline fight.
Not the only bemusing radio message that Sainz would get from his pit box this race. Did you see the wonderful exchange where they said something like phase 1 braking going later, and he's just like, I don't know what that means.
Right.
Good stuff.
But yeah, we haven't discussed pit stops yet. Sainz came in on lap 22 from third place behind Verstappen, but Red Bull did not respond until lap 26, meaning that Sainz ended up undercutting Verstappen pretty handily. And lap 38, after a pit stop, Lawson gets by Gasly at turn 12 for 11th. Lawson making a pretty good case here for, I don't know, don't sleep on me, Red Bull. Can't say the same really for Sergio Perez in this race.
No.
And Sergio Perez isn't modifying his very own Civic at a garage with his mate, whereas Lawson's living that life and is just ready for great things. He's learning the drift. He's watching Fast and the Furious, the original, like, you know, at home, and just like taking it all in. Like
he's going up the hill with tofu in the back.
Yeah, exactly. I screamed and cried and moaned about the fact that they were keeping Checo during the summer. Like, this is now getting like Red Bull's in action. The problem we are facing in this race is not the fact that Checo is in whatever position he's in at this stage in the race, 8th or 9th. The problem is that there are Ferraris at the front. This is no longer will McLaren win the constructors. This is will Red Bull become third. And like, it is crazy that they have let this get to this stage. Like, if they win the drivers' championship, that's great. But these teams want to win constructors, and
that's becoming
third. I know this might turn into quite an embarrassing season for Red Bull, and their weirdness with their drivers is a big reason for that.
A weirdness that stems from that car kills second, like the number 2 drivers. In the Max era, the defining trait has been, why can't you drive like that guy? And it does feel like we've ended up in this place where the Delta now is really embarrassing. It's caught up with them, but I do still, like, I'm still so curious. Like, at this point, we now know, like, okay, it's probably like Checo's not going to bag you those consistent points you want to see for a number 2 driver. The gap is too big. But I understand where Red Bull would be like, I don't know how confident I can be in any of these guys.
Right.
But it does look like the stock is up on Lawson.
Yeah. All right, I have one more bullet point here, a big one that will probably cause some some conversation. But before we get to that, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back after this. All right, folks. Norris leaves his pit stop latest of all the front runners, going from medium to hard on lap 33 and giving himself tires that are 6 laps newer than Verstappen. And he slowly gains time on Verstappen, and by lap 51, with 5 laps to go, finally catches up to him. So this would be for third place. So Norris tries an overtake at turn 12, and the two of them battle throughout that arena section with Verstappen keeping the position this time. 1 lap later, Norris is ahead on the outside as they head into turn 12, or is he? Verstappen brakes way late, and the two go off track, just like turn 1 before. But Norris gets a better exit and this time stays ahead as they go through turn 13. Verstappen complaining that Norris overtook him off the track, and Norris responding, I think I was ahead, or not responding, but saying over to his radio, I think I was ahead at the apex. Let me know if you think otherwise. Well, the stewards thought otherwise and handed him a 5-second penalty. And by the end of the race, he is only 3 seconds ahead of Verstappen, so he drops to 4th. So before we get to that, I'll just run down the race result here. Charles Leclerc keeps that first place, wins the race, a commanding job. And Carlos Sainz comes in second. Max Verstappen ends up third after Norris's penalty. Norris fourth. Piastri in fifth. George Russell sixth. Sergio Perez seventh. Nico Hülkenberg eighth. Liam Lawson ninth. And Franco Colapinto, the last of the points-paying positions, in 10th. Another point for Williams. Behind them, we've got Magnussen, Gasly, Alonso, Tsunoda, Stroll, Albon, Bottas, Ocon, and Zhou, and then the DNF of Hamilton. So, what do we make of this Norris Verstappen incident? Danny,
oh boy,
you just rubbed your temples, and that is exactly how I feel about this. I'm so tired.
So I feel like over the years, people, if they were to sort of make a statement about how I am with Max, is that in general, I'm quite critical of him. I'm critical of his sort of racecraft when it comes to fighting individual drivers on turns. When it comes to either overtaking or protecting an overtake, I find him to be very aggressive at times. I also understand that there are plenty of drivers over the years who have a similar profile. Drivers who, for whatever reason, I am perhaps a bit warmer to. So I'm aware that I have an element of an unconscious bias probably in here somewhere. This one, to me, I am sort of once again more frustrated with Norris than I am with Max. I think Verstappen does not have a great car. He is attempting to get past a car who is struggling, or he's attempting to defend against a championship rival, so he's obviously going to do as much as he can. Norris, in this situation, was ahead of Max before they got to the turn, but he wasn't by the time they got to the apex, which is kind of crazy to me, which is, I think, a sort of a level of naive optimism that Norris had, similar to the first turn, where he's either forgetting who he's racing, or maybe he's just not as aggressive and he doesn't want to crash out, or I don't know what the deal. Verstappen shoots down to basically make sure that he's ahead at the apex. He has to brake later. That's fine. He also slows down a little bit after the apex in that second phase, perhaps because he's trying not to go off track, or perhaps because he's trying to force Lando to. I'm not quite sure. 6 of one, half dozen of the other. It's hard to tell. He obviously goes off the track. Lando obviously goes off the track, and then they both come back on. I think the death knell from McLaren on this is what happened with Russell about 20 laps earlier, where this exact thing happened. I thought the Russell situation was way harsher than this one, but they adjudicated against Russell. And I don't know if McLaren's pit wall maybe aren't watching the rest of the race because they're focusing on their driver. I don't know the mechanics of engineers and teams and stuff like that. But considering how many laps were left in the race, I was actually shocked in the moment that they were going to try and say that this was a legal overtake and not let Max go ahead and try and do it again. That's the part that completely confused me.
Yeah, I've got some color for that. Racefans.net has a transcript of their radio communications here. So Norris says, I think I was ahead at the apex. Let me know if you think otherwise. And then his race engineer says, we think you were ahead of the apex. So our opinion is you were ahead. Both cars went off track. Yeah.
Two things on this quick before I let it go for Rob is that, like, I think there are some turns where the apex is really clear, and there are some turns where the apex is maybe a little bit open to interpretation. I think Norris wouldn't have known because he was ahead of Max when he entered the braking zone, but Max broke super late. So, to me, is it dive bomby? I wouldn't. I've seen both Hamilton and Verstappen do more dive bomby overtakes than this. If you watch this and then watch like the one we all went crazy about, which was the Jeddah one at turn 1, that was the most over the top. That was definitely a dive bomb forcing someone off the track situation. That's not really what this is. Max got down the inside and almost kept it on the track. Late in the race with not great tires, yada yada yada. So, yeah, I think I don't believe in like the letter of the law because ultimately we have different stewards every week. We have different, the rules are changing all the time and reacting to certain things. I think they've been trying to move away from the who's at the front of the apex, who's in front at the apex thing for a while because the problem is it encourages this type of dive bomby stuff. To me, Max by the letter of the law or not even by the letter of the law. I think by any interpretation of it, for me, I think he deserves to be, it's his turn, I think, by the time he goes in. I think Lando is a bit naive in giving him that space again. Yeah, and I can't argue it. And I think I'd be someone who, if I really thought there was a case against Max, I'd probably be happy to drive it home. But honestly, in this scenario, I think it was good, aggressive racecraft, and I think Lando was just not fighting at that same level and left the door too open again. And then didn't back out and try and do it again in the extra 4 laps they had. That's the part that shocked me the most, was we're going to leave this up to the stewards. But I will say, I think outside of this specific instance and how these two drivers were driving, I do think that this is a problem that the FIA or Formula One have to figure out, because I think this, and they tried to, coming into this race, they were like, oh, we're putting in all this fake gravel and stuff, right? Because they're trying to stop this leaving track limits malarkey, but it's just a shame that kind of once again a race came down to it, even though that they know it's a problem and they were trying to get away from it.
Yeah, I think I haven't looked at all the incidents because like there were so many incidents of this nature being investigated at this race, and I've looked at all the rulings the stewards made from some of the commentary I've read. They're actually pretty consistent in how they ruled a lot of these things. It looks like for this weekend they were really adhering to that first to the apex rule, and just putting the ruler across the shot of the turn, and context kind of disregarded. It is which car is on that line first, which I think we can all agree is kind of dissatisfying, because that is not, you can make your car reach the apex without having any reasonable good faith shot at making the corner. Yeah. And if you're going to force the apex thing, then you're basically saying, actually, you don't really have to try to make the turn. You can just, and at that point, like you've got it, which I think was the point Brundle was getting at, is like you can drive a car through this loophole where you can kind of cancel an overtake by sort of playing around with this standard. I think it was extra grating here because so Coda has the series of turns that there's lots of runoff to either side, and the two cars can go side by side through multiple corners. The investigation was being triggered so aggressively at the start of this complex of corners that it was like the rest of the side-by-side racing didn't matter, right? Because it was immediately going back to, well, it's like an offside ruling where like an entire play can happen. And it's like, actually, the whole thing was offside, reset for the next lap. And you understand where that is going to be more important at racetracks that are really tight. And maybe it's more dangerous to run someone off where like there's more greater chance of a safety car coming out from something. But here, you're kind of watching, you can tell there's space on the track. Like, these guys could just floor it and say, like, hell with it, I'm going through. And you'd rather see that kind of racing. Oh, Max runs him off? Great, I'm just going to stay in. Which, by the way, prior to this incident we were talking about, Max 100% did. It was Lando, right? Who he is now on the inside of the corner. He goes all four wheels off. Max, I think it was Max, flooring it way to the outside, cutting across, like, not by where the candy stripe, rumble strip is. That's where I think Norris was. Max was going across the part. It was like painted with the stars and like the coda decorations. And he rejoined and held his place. And it was like, well, they both went off the track. There was a difference in degree. One of them stayed near the track. One of them just kind of shit-canned the entire track limits concept to begin with. But for me, it was like you could see there was space for some really good hard racing to the complex. And instead of getting that, we got this incident's under review. This incident's under review. This person gets 5 seconds. And that is just not a good place to end up with racing. So I think this is one of those things where you do not like this standard for saying like who has the right to the corner, because here you could see how insufficient it was to sort of judge like who was making a good faith effort to stay in track limits, who was trying to make the corner, and that didn't really matter. But I think there's also an element of, and this goes back to the turn one, the lap one turn one thing,
right?
Norris. Before a race, Norris needs to watch the monologue from Ferrari, basically, where he's talking about like committing to a corner, the commitment speech that Ferrari gives to the drivers in that movie, because I do think there's an element of you have an advantage really in that you're coming into a fight with Max Verstappen where there's years of game tape of who is Max Verstappen when the chips are down, when you're fighting for meaningful results. Not the shit the last couple of years where he's, on autopilot sleepwalking to a championship, but like when it actually matters and there's something he cares for at stake, how does he race you? And Norris doesn't have the ruthlessness, it would seem, to really like rise to that challenge, right? Like that the turn one thing required slamming the door hard and maybe risking an accident, but like it does require like not even giving him an ounce of daylight to try and pull off these moves. I always felt like 2021, by the latter stages of that season, Hamilton raced Max differently than anyone else. Like they just stopped. It was very hard racing, not the most sporting racing, but that is kind of how you have to race Max, because he will say, I'm going to do this thing. We'll see what the stewards are going to do. They won't do anything. He will anticipate that there's enough gray in the rule book that there's not cause to overturn something he does on course, and if there is a chance for him to get his car through any kind of gap you leave, whether it's kind of safe to take that gap or not, he's going to go for it. And here in this race, Norris doesn't seem to have, and I'm not saying I want some sort of NASCAR like, hey, just take him out. You know what I mean? But like, you have to sometimes, like, you just have to be willing to risk that with certain drivers you're out there with, because they will risk it. And if you are consistently like backing out or like leaving that gap so that you can both like stay safe and like make sure there's no incident, he's going to take that advantage, and you're going to be sitting there being like, well, exactly what happened at the end of turn 1. He dive bombed the corner, and he didn't even try to make it. That's true. Nobody did anything.
I think, like, we've been waiting for years for, well, so it goes back to the sort of Senna thing, whereas like Senna was like, I'm going to go there, and if you close that door, we're going to crash, right? And then that's what's going to happen. And you know that, and his power in that scenario was the fact that he was scoring lots of points and could probably afford, in many cases, to crash. And that's kind of the case with Max at the moment. Like, Lando really doesn't want to. Lando's chasing Max in the championship, so he really doesn't want to crash out, even more than Max does, right? Max could take them both out, and that, not that I'm saying he's doing that, but like, if they crash,
well, he did. It worked out. Like,
I guess
Austria, it worked out very well.
Right. The one driver that when the reason it got so touchy, I think, between Hamilton and Verstappen in that year was Hamilton and Verstappen were both willing to go for it, and that's what we saw at Stowe in Silverstone, was them both going for the gap, and Max had an accident that we now know seems to still affect him in some way. Like, it was a really bad crash. We don't like necessarily seeing that either. The problem with this overtake rule is that it's sort of always benefiting. If you're defending up the inside of somebody, and you force if you force somebody wide, like what Max did at the first turn, right, where he basically forces Lando to go around. But if somebody like tries to, if in that scenario he's able to basically force the other car out wide, right? I'm not saying Max, I'm just using Max as an example. But if you're defending up the inside, you can force the other car outside as much as you want. And if you're on the inside and you're in first, and somebody tries to dive bomb you and you were in first, you can just say that they forced you off the track. So in both scenarios, if you're the car who is being overtaken, is under threat of being overtaken, you can basically game the system to make it so the stewards will be in your favor. Yeah. You can either say, oh, they overtook illegally, or I was forced off the track, and you just do the Max thing in that situation, which we were mentioning earlier, which he's done a lot, which is that he'll go off the track and then basically pedal to the metal and get ahead. But because he was in first and ahead at the apex when that happened, he's in the right. So I think there's like a fundamental problem with this rule, which is doing the thing that we all hate, which is stopping overtaking. Because basically, if you're a smart driver that Max is, you can always game the system to make sure that the stewards land in your favor. And I think it's a bit of a problem. You
said something there real quick I want to revisit. When you were saying he's in first at the apex of turn 1. I think, like, by the letter of the law right now, as we're judging these things, that's what we're saying, is that Max was in first at turn 1 at the start of this race. Look at the overhead shot in terms of the racing line and tell me who was actually, you know what I mean? Because that is the thing we are often like running into, is that it is so clear that if one of those cars can make the corner and have a meaningful amount of speed heading down to turn 2, like, one of these cars is clearly like leading this race. It is not Max. Max, if you're taking that line, I think this is the other thing that bugs me about the way they're calling this rule, especially with these like shots down the inside. The thing about if you're going to try to pass on the inside like that, you're either going to basically force someone way the hell out wide, which is what everyone is doing now, and it's kind of annoying, or you're going to do what I think is sort of the spirit of like a move down the inside is, you're going to try to like hug the inside of that apex and see if on exit you can seal the move, right? Or like race down to the next corner. And that's not what is happening. The entire thing is getting like the entire incident now, the entire battle comes down to whatever is the first corner in like this complex, wherever it is happening on track. And then there's like kind of no further meaningful action, because what this rule is encouraging is no longer the like side-by-side battle of the two drivers like taking the different lines that exist through the race course. Is just one driver saying, okay, I'm gonna take both, and because I got my wing across this magic line, the stewards are going to call it this way. And it was happening everywhere with, at this race. I think it just highlights the issue with the rule, but I also do think what we see here is a little bit of Norris is very quick to be like, I should have driven better. It's and that's fair. Like he should have, but also I think there has to be a willingness to say, like, you can't just trust that I'm going to bail you out of a dive bomb. Like, I'm not always going to just say, okay, I'm just going to like let myself get shoved off. And right now it feels like he's kind of signaled that he will, right? And I think that's the ultimate advantage of a dude like Senna and a little bit of a dude like Max, is that anyone racing them knows that they're willing to risk that collision. They're willing to touch wheels or smash side ponds into each other if they feel like they've got a good shot, and if they think you'll blank. And Norris right now, I'm not sure we've seen that moment from him where he sort of stays in. And I think you do that once or twice, you get a different margin of error from other drivers. And until you sort of demonstrate that willingness to just like risk those types of incidents, you're going to have to worry about like, what is the wild thing that Max is going to attempt.
And I think like there's definitely half of me that thinks that Verstappen is certainly more cynical than Norris is. Whether or not you think that's a good thing or bad thing might come down to if you're a fan of Max Verstappen or Red Bull or not. I think it doesn't promote the type of like healthy, good old boy overtaking that you'd see in like in a comic book or something, right? It's not the idealized version. But then this is a real sport and these are real competitors, and that's maybe an unfair standard to force people to go by. What I do think is maybe a bit more fair and accurate is that I think Red Bull are smart and savvy and are used to fighting at the front. And I think this is maybe another example of McLaren's naivety in that respect. I think you kind of have to be a bit claws out. You kind of have to be tactical. And there was 4 or 5 laps left in this race, and they had 4 or 5 laps to overtake him. They didn't just have this one. And in that moment, they, it wasn't Lando didn't exactly do the right version of the overtake. Maybe he has to close the door faster. Maybe he has to cut the corner off. I don't know what he has to do. I'm not a race driver, but he seemed to leave a little bit too much there. And then if that wasn't the time they were going to get the overtake done, then live to fight another day. But unfortunately, they left it in the hands of the stewards, and all of us watching it live knew. Like, you could tell live, ooh, please don't let this race come down to a decision after it. Like, you could tell in the moment. And I was disappointed that McLaren didn't have the guts to maybe give him back the position and go again.
Last thing I'll say on this is, like, just where's the place on the track you can give a place back, but really screw the person you're giving the place back to? Because that's the other thing is, like, okay, the stewards, I wouldn't have gambled on the stewards with that. I was like, I just don't know that they're going to let that one slide. But at that point, you got to go be cynical, right? You got to go be like, hey, give that place back at a part of the track where he has no shot of keeping it. You know what I mean? Like, give him that place back right before the DRS detection window.
Yes, right before turn 10, I think, is probably... Yep. They actually moved... That's one of the DRS zones that they've moved... detection points they've moved in the past few years because of the dive bomb problem. Because of people just sending it into those turns, getting within a second, and then catching people on the other side. But, yeah, probably there. Yeah.
All right, well let's move on here. Run down the driver standings, see how things shake out, and more importantly, the constructor standings after the United States Grand Prix. Max Verstappen is still on top with 354 points. Lando Norris in second with 297. Charles Leclerc in third with 275. Oscar Piastri fourth with 247. Sainz is in fifth with 215. Hamilton in sixth with 177. Russell's in seventh with 167. Sergio Perez eighth with 150. And then a jump down to Alonso with 62, and Nico Hulkenberg in 10th with 29. And we've got Stroll with 24, Tsunoda with 22, Alex Albon and Daniel Ricciardo with 12, Magnussen with 8, tied with Pierre Gasly, Oliver Behrman with 7, Colapinto and Ocon both have 5 points. That was fast, Franco. Liam Lawson has 2 points. Behind them, Zhou, Sargent, and Bottas all with 0. In the constructor standings, McLaren is on top with 544. Red Bull in second with 504. 8 points behind is Ferrari.
Wow. Yeah.
In third. Mercedes has 344 points. Aston Martin's in fifth with 86. Gene Haas and team have 38 points, 2 points ahead of RB with 36. Williams has 17. Alpine has 13. And Sauber, the goose egg. And now let's turn our attention to the news. Speaking of things that might not necessarily be in the rules, or are they? Lot of stuff going around the paddock, it seems, about a bib. The bib is evidently also called the T-tray, is, I think, the front of the floor. So this is the part that is closest to the ground. And when we adjust ride height, this is one of the things that goes up and down. Let's see, where to start. So going into this weekend, one team had complained to the FIA that they thought that another team, and this is, I should just say, McLaren complained that Red Bull had a thing in their car, in their cockpit of the car, that could adjust the ride height of the car. Now, this ride height is one of the things that is locked after qualifying, between qualifying and the race, known as parc fermé. There are certain things you can adjust, and there are certain things that you absolutely can't. And so if Red Bull was adjusting the ride height using this in-cockpit adjustment, that would be a gross breaking of the rules. So this kind of turned out to be a non-story because Red Bull was like, we talked to the FIA a while ago about this. We've had it in our car for a long time. And then they uploaded the designs to some FIA server that everybody could look at. It's like not something that the driver can just, it's not a knob or something. It's down by the pedals that a mechanic would have to get in there and do. Now, could a mechanic get in there and do it between qualifying and the race? Sure, but he could also do a lot of other stuff that would also be illegal. So the FIA, though, in their desire, I think, to just close this off, has told Red Bull, listen, after qualifying, when we enter parc fermé, put a sticker over it so that we know if you've tampered it. And apparently, that is good enough. Zach Brown's still not really happy about that. He points out that, like, well, if you're telling me that, like, this is the same as any other thing, then why are you putting a sticker over it?
Oh, Zach.
Anyway, that's, if you hear about all this bib business, that's what's going on there. All right,
Okay.
Rules and regs, Danny. Let's keep this train rolling.
Yeah, sure. Yes. Do you remember? Was it 5 years ago? Incredibly, we introduced the fastest lap to Formula One.
Wow.
Extra point if you were in the top 10.
Yes.
Top 10. If you managed to get your fastest lap, and we had a big conversation about it a couple of weeks ago when Daniel Ricciardo in his last race used it. Maybe to have one last hurrah, or maybe to neg the biggest competitor of his sister team, the team that was rejecting him. And we had a big conversation about, maybe it's time to get rid of the fastest lap, because all people seem to do with it is nag other people with it, and it seems kind of cynical, and I don't know, we'd be better off without it perhaps. Formula One tends to agree, and they will be axing the fastest lap at the end of this season. The initial announcement seemed to suggest that they were axing it immediately, but perhaps it was just a badly written press release. They have confirmed to race fans since that they will not be changing the rule until 2025. But fastest lap, at least as we know it, is gone. Gentlemen, pour when I press F to pay respects. F for fastest lap. Will either of you guys miss fastest lap? I liked fastest lap when it came in because it was neat and weird, and it was like a fun other thing. And then now it just annoys me. I think it's annoying and stupid. And who cares? Anyone can go fast at the end. They've no fuel left. So it's just like a stupid little who wants to go do it for fun thing. I don't know. Rob, what do you reckon?
Despise it for this exact reason. Like, it has never generated anything interesting. It is literally who has a safe delta to somebody else in the top 10 positions, and then they are going to stop. They're going to get on the soft tire. They're going to do an outlap, do a flyer, and that's it. And it just is never. It is not generating anything interesting. And then something like the Ricardo fastest lap thing happens. We also have to pretend like, F1 was giving a 21 gun salute as he departed the sport. What a way to go out. What a worthy ending to a career.
It could have, in a way, he could have gotten the last fastest lap if they had decided to get rid of it. That would have been. Mm-hmm. Who got it this week? Was it O'Connor? It was somebody outside the top 10, wasn't it?
I don't know.
See, there you go. You don't even know. We don't even know. We don't even care. Yeah. Still looking it up.
Fastest lap. Esteban Ocon, you're right.
Esteban Ocon.
Way to
Who
go.
had the most So Verstappen's probably got your pub quiz answer, I suspect, is Verstappen has the most fastest laps of any racer. I'm going to guess.
Probably, yeah. Yeah, Ocon was finished in 18th, so he did not get a point. All right. From one member of the Red Bull family to another, Rob. Speaking of McLaren and Red Bull fighting each other.
Yeah, so Dr. Helmut Marko, doctor of law, but insists on the doctor,
Doctor
was giving
old.
an interview, just his sort of view of the state of the championship. And he was talking about like the reason why he wasn't too worried about the challenge coming from Norris and McLaren. And one of his reasons for that was simply that there are certain mental weaknesses in Norris's game.
Can you tell it from the size of his skull? Is that how he's figuring it out, or?
He's a doctor, Danny.
He's got like Helmut Marko is sort of like he's got sort of a Latin American way about him.
Yeah, exactly.
So Marko,
everyone should know
Max
this is
the
a reference.
best.
This is a reference to a previous Helmut Marko incident, not me and Rob being racist.
No, what was it?
It was Perez. He said he said they don't work very hard. Remember?
Yeah, but also he got the thing where he was like, he said
South American,
right?
South American.
South
yeah.
American.
Yeah. So he was
Fucking
racist
great.
Awesome.
and it incorrect.
Geographically challenged. Yeah.
Yes.
So he says Max is the best. He's the fastest, and above all, he has the mental strength to theoretically fight for the world championship more than Charles Leclerc and Lando Norris. Marko said, "We know Norris has some mental weaknesses. I've read about some of the rituals he needs to do to perform well on race day." This was apparently like Norris spoke recently about the fact that he gets apparently like pretty severe jitters before racing. And the quote from Norris said, he said, "I barely eat anything on Sundays. I struggle to drink anything on Sundays just because of nerves and just because of pressure. I think it's just about how you turn that into a positive thing. How do you not let it affect you in a bad way? How can you use it in a good way to help you focus on the correct things?" So McLaren definitely clutching pearls over this. Zach Brown said they set the sport back 10 to 20 years on subjects around mental health. Brown said Lando's been kind of an ambassador for mental health. Toto has spoken about mental health, so I think it's a serious issue. We tried to talk about bringing to the forefront. Poking that situation, I think, is pretty inappropriate and sets us back 10, 20 years. So here's the thing. Like, Helmut Marko is a deeply annoying gadfly, right? Like this is someone who lives to give quotes like this.
Yeah.
And he kind of isn't worth the consideration. Now, raises questions about like how much I want someone like that being in charge of a driver pipeline, and yet there he is. Yeah. The driver pipeline has produced a lot of viable F1 drivers. So who's to say? The other annoying thing just about how this all played out, the timing of it, is that Marko makes these comments, and then there's a race where you're like, Norris, though, does sometimes have trouble showing out in these positions.
It's like that the worst person you know has a good opinion meme.
Yeah. But honestly, in his defense, that might be a little bit. If what Marko is kind of more referring to is the fact that Norris chokes a little bit at race starts when the pressure's really on him, I think that is a pretty uncontroversial statement. I'm not necessarily sure he's like not clear how much he's saying like, look at that loser. It seems like he has a little bit of pre-race anxiety. It's possible that kind of what he's also alluding to is the fact that there are clearly like performance gaps in the way he like handles races. But Marko doesn't really get the benefit of the doubt, and he does seem like kind of the sort of dude who would stick his thumb in those pain points. And there's a lot of alumni of the Red Bull driver program who felt that Marko was that kind of guy. Just further bickering between the McLaren and Red Bull camps. Further reminder of the way Marko kind of floats around haunting F1. So weird to see him at the end of this, like standing next to Christian Horner and his family outside the the celebrations. And I can't even imagine. I think this is where you have to really go on a mental journey to imagine yourself being one of these people. Because these are two guys who like appear to have spent the last year trying to get each other fired. Yeah. And going scorched earth.
One of them perhaps leaking messages of the other one allegedly having an extramarital affair, who has like young children. like I don't think either of these guys are nice people, and I'm delighted for the two of them. They deserve each other. Yeah, two things can be true at once. I think saying that Lando doesn't have the mental strength of Max Verstappen is a very uncontroversial opinion. I think Max is the type of person who has incredible mental strength. He had mental strength enough to survive his childhood with his father, who also seemed like a psychopath, and to be able to, battle and win multiple world championships and fight Lewis Hamilton, who's one of the best racers the sport's ever had, as Verstappen is now at this stage too. And Lando, as far back as that race in Russia with the rain, has had moments where he has slipped at the final hurdle, and he's a lot better this year than he was in the past, and I suspect he'll be a lot better next year, and it's something he has to work on. And I think all that is true, and I also think that can be true, and also there can be a truth that Helmut Marko, shut the fuck up. Like, no one cares, old man. Be quiet. Sort out Sergio Perez. Oh, is your Sergio Perez plan going super well? How's your driver pipe? Like, sort out your own house, first of all, as you're slipping down the Constructors' Championship. You know what I mean?
All right, last news article here. Kind of a fun one, Rob.
So they gave out kind of goofy generic trophies at the USGP this week, and those were not the trophies they were supposed to give out. They had Pirelli had special trophies for this race. this would be the unveiling of Hiru, a fun little trophy mascot-like figure, a silhouette design and collaboration between Pirelli and Italian designer Matteo Machiavelli.
Okay.
So the word was that Hiru disappeared because there were some copyright clearance issues that like it looked similar to other designs. I don't know if we'll be able to get this in the YouTube upload of the podcast, but maybe it'll be a link to it in the show notes. But fellas, you guys have the link in the document.
I sure do.
Do you think you see the issue?
Yeah, I see like multiple issues. Like this
Daft
to
Punk?
me,
You also see Daft Punk here?
I see Daft Punk. I see the Mickey Mouse ears.
Oh, certainly.
And there's also like this other, like you ever go into one of those, like a shop that sells like designer toys, you know what I mean? Like expensive looking toys that like, you know, men in their mid to late 20s put in their apartment.
It's next to the samurai swords.
Yes, you know that one that looks like it's kind of like a rabbity looking thing with it just looks like one of those. It looks like one of those.
Also, they're Lego people.
They're a little bit
Do they have Lego legs?
Look at their hands.
Yeah, Lego arms, the little like
and bodies
the
and
little,
legs.
like curving pipe with the,
you're right.
The little C-clamp hands coming out of it.
Yeah, they're also that. That's very, very true.
Is Generation
the-
Remix, Danny.
And they have the I think the smile. It looks like the smile looks like the Amazon smile, on at the bottom of the helmet, doesn't it?
But I do think Drew's onto something there. I would have just given these trophies out.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Like the helmet has mouse ears, and you think it's Mickey Mouse? Show me the rest of the Mickey Mouse in this. Just show me. I'm curious. Oh, you think this looks like Daft Punk? Daft Punk got like, and it ain't Dead Mouse. So I like come at me. Like I will take on all comers. I will defend this. Is the trophy inspired by various recognizable silhouettes and forms? Absolutely, as we all are.
Okay, we need a Patreon stretch goal to buy Rob one of these trophies.
Oh,
Yeah,
dude,
it's
if
a
I were a
shame.
driver and I saw this versus the trophy they handed out, I'd be like, okay, look, I'll never take a photo of it, but like, I want Hiru. Give me Hiru. He's kind of shitty, yeah. It's not like, you know, he's not going to the Louvre or anything like that. It's not going to be like, they're not going to be doing a Hiru installation at the Guggenheim, but it's kind of goofy. I would have it in my trophy case.
Give me Hiru. Give me the Mexico Grand Prix, Danny.
Sure, you can have it. We're gonna go there. We've been going there on and off since 1963. We're only back there. It's almost its 10th year anniversary since it came back. It was 2015. It came back after a 24-year hiatus. It was gone for a significant amount of time. The current format is almost the exact same as the original, like 19. It's been around since before 63, like maybe 1952 or something. This almost the same format. The only difference is the corner, the straight at the at turn 12. It now basically goes into the baseball stadium, the Photosol team baseball stadium. Which is a really cool part of this track. You can get, you know, tickets there, and there's a fun little arena section. There's not much overtaking there or anything. Turn 12 used to go straight and go on to like a crazy banked right-hander that was almost 180 degrees, called the Peralta. So that's gone. It's kind of a harrowing, dangerous turn. So that's why they managed. I think it wasn't in line with modern FIA standards when they brought it back in 2015. Or for Formula One, so that's the only major change apart from just some curbs and walls and stuff have been extended. So yeah, otherwise it's pretty much the old one. 71 laps, 4.3 kilometers, 2.7 miles. Overtaking spots on this one, unfortunately, generally go down to turn 1 after the DRS zone, turn 4 after that DRS zone, and we did get some side-by-side through Sector 2 and a little bit of fun. I think there was a couple of overtakes at the exit of the arena section in recent years. But this race tends to be less about track position overtakes and more about tire management and whatnot. One of the reasons for that is that it's also super high. It's 2 kilometers above sea level. So tricky for the drivers physically, also for the engines physically. So it's another consideration that they have to worry about. As a fan experience, we've heard from listeners to this podcast that it's one of the best ones. You can take the subway and buses directly to it, gets people in and out. Apparently good seating, good food, and good vibes across the whole thing. And in terms of memorable moments over the years, there was a famous, one of Jim Clark's more famous wins in terms of his industry was here in 1967, where he won by over a minute while his clutch didn't work for a significant amount of the race. Perhaps something to do with that, the 2 kilometers problem. There was a great Ferrari double, a fantastic race in 1990, where Alain Prost won and Nigel Mansell came second. Prost was fighting with Senna for a chunk of it and caught up with him, and Nigel Mansell had a wonderful battle with Gerhard Berger near the end as well to clutch second. Schumacher actually got his first ever podium here 2 years later in 1992. Mansell won that race, I'm pretty sure. Schumi came third with Benetton to get on the podium for the very first time. 2017, people might remember the crash between Kimi Räikkönen and Valtteri Bottas, which was sort of round 2 for them that year after the crash, a much more infamous crash in Sochi right at the end of that race. So that was an interesting one. And then in modern years, it's been fairly, it's incident-less or quietish races over the past few years. In 2021, there was an absolute mare of a start for several cars who crashed out. I think Sonoda, Ricciardo. There was a turn 1 incident basically where a bunch of people went wide, came back on the track, somebody spun, then there was another crash on the entrance to turn 2. It was kind of just a super messy one. And those are the ones that I was able to pull out of the memory banks. Hopefully, we'll make some new memories this week in Mexico.
Nice. Was it last year that Perez immediately crashed out?
Oh, I can't remember.
Got bounced off the track
I don't
or
think
something.
that happened. It's very funny.
That would be unfortunate for him. That's one of the best things about the modern race since they brought it back in 2015 is Checo has been around this entire time. So, yeah.
He's on a lot of
right.
billboards, if I recall, Drive to Survive correctly.
You're 100% right.
Did he crash out immediately last year?
Yeah. He got into it with Charles Leclerc. Yeah.
Well, the weather at least might mix things up a bit. We were looking at 71 degrees Fahrenheit, 22 Celsius for qualifying day. Precipitate, 5%.
Oh.
Sorry.
It's just humid.
Sorry. 49% humidity. Wind 11 kilometers an hour, 7 miles an hour out of the north. That's qualifying day. Race day, 0% rain chance. 70 degrees Fahrenheit, 21 Celsius. Wind, similar. So, looks to be just fine weather for racing. All right. Well, we already went down the standings for the Drivers' Championship and the Constructors' Championship, but we haven't touched on Fantasy League yet. If you'd like to join the Fantasy League, you can do so using the link in the show notes. Here are the podium for the United States Grand Prix. Here are the podium. In third, Gunther Steiner, as in gone from the sport.
I miss him.
He out. Second place, Dead Men Walking. Somehow this, I don't know how you did this. Number 2 here. This team is both McLarens, both Ferraris, Ferrari and McLaren the teams, and Max Verstappen. How do you get that as your fantasy team?
Yeah. Are they using Hacksaw?
Probably.
What's going on?
Well, if they were, they maybe would have hacksawed their way to the front. Like number 1, the slow baton.
So like Jensen Button?
Baton.
No?
I'm not sure.
Slow.
Overall, though, podium looks like this. In third place, Forza Vincenzo. And in second, Alpino Noir. And in first, Mad Max Mad.
Mad Max Mad.
Mad Max Mad. That's the Fantasy League. You can send us an email if you like at shiftf1podcast@gmail.com or f1.cool/emails. You can also hit us up on the socials using the link in the show notes. That is us around the internet. Should we take it around the world, Danny?
Let's race around the world. Yeah.
MotoGP is racing at the Chang International Circuit in Thailand for the OR Thailand Grand Prix.
Is that the beer?
Buriram Sprint. I'm not sure.
Is Chang the beer? I think it is.
We've got the Craftsman trucks at the Homestead Miami Speedway for the Baptist Health 200, followed by the Xfinity Series. They're also at the Homestead Miami Speedway for the Credit One NASCAR MX Credit Card 300.
Credit Card MX Credit.
Yep.
Homestead.
The Repco Supercars are in Surfer's Paradise.
Oh,
It's
man.
a street circuit, don't you know? For the Boost Mobile Gold Coast 500.
Where's Surfer's Paradise? What state's that in?
Australia, right?
Must be, right?
Queensland? Is that what QLD stands for?
IndyCar used to race there, I think.
Yeah, they did.
Very different day.
Been spending most our races racing in a Surfer's Paradise. We got NASCAR. Also at the Homestead in Miami for the Straight Talk Wireless 400. That's why you listen to this podcast. We give you the Straight Talk.
Straight talk. Yep.
And Formula One, it just keeps going. I think. Do we have 2 triple headers to end this season? Is that what's happening?
We do have a gap after, but yeah, because we've this and then is Interlagos after the gap? No, it's here. It's Mexico, Mexico and then Vegas. No, is it Mexico, Interlagos and then Vegas and the other
I am
ones?
correct. We have a triple header: Austin, Mexico, Brazil, and then a week break. Or no, 2 week break, 20 days. Then we've got Vegas, Qatar, and Abu Dhabi.
Yeah, there you go.
Pray for us.
Different nights out there. Vegas, Qatar, Abu Dhabi. Qatar and Abu Dhabi, not that different from each other. Vegas, yeah, a little bit different.
A little bit. Formula One this weekend kicks things off Friday, October 25th. Free Practice 1 is at 2:30 p.m. on ESPN2 Eastern Time. Free Practice 2 is at 6 p.m. on ESPN News. Saturday, October 26th, Free Practice 3 is at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time on ESPN News. And qualifying 5 p.m. Eastern Time on ESPN News. But the race, everyone, Sunday, October 27th, 4 p.m. Eastern on ABC. Terrestrial television.
I thought the Grimoire was lost.
The Grimoire.
It's been
I
found.
keep throwing it away, but then when I wake up the next day, it's on my bedside table.
And
On this
what's
day,
weird is
Drew.
It keeps adding dates, but dates that haven't happened yet.
Danny, what happened this day in history?
On October 23rd, in the past, for the final round of the 1977 season, the Japanese Grand Prix was held at Fuji on this day. James Hunt took his 10th and final victory in the McLaren, although his title rival from the previous season, Niki Lauda, had already wrapped up the World Championship. The race was marred by another tragic accident when Gilles Villeneuve's Ferrari hit Ronnie Peterson's Tyrrell and cartwheeled off the track. Although Villeneuve was unhurt, a marshal and a photographer were killed.
Oh my God.
As well as being Hunt's last Formula One win, it was also the last for the McLaren team for 4 long years, as they were haunted by a photographer. No. The team would not reach the top step of the podium until Ron Dennis took control and John Watson won the British Grand Prix in July of 1981. They didn't have to wait that long. Don't be so dramatic, Grimoire. There you go.
I think that's kind of that book's
A
whole deal.
a 4-year win drought. Can you imagine?
Can you imagine? Unthinkable back in the 70s.
All right. Well, I would ask for your final thoughts, but we are running way long. We'll get them next time. Thanks, everyone, for listening. If you'd like to support the show and get access to all of our bonus episodes, the ad-free version of the podcast, and the official Shift+F1 Discord, you can do so over at patreon.com/ShiftF1. Have a great race weekend, everyone. We will see you all next week.